Hey everyone, Steve from Backcountry Gallery here, and this time I want to talk about photographing birds at the beach. I've just come back from hanging out along the Gulf Coast of Florida for a few weeks, and I frequently found myself along various beaches photographing shorebirds, wading birds, that type of thing. As I shot, I was thinking, hey, this would make a great video topic. Before we begin though, remember that if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button down there in the corner. Also, swing by my site and sign up for my free email newsletter so you never miss one of my articles or blog posts. So, here's a quick list of 10 tips and tricks for getting better shots of all those birds along the beach. Since we're dealing with water and sand here, remember that you take any of the following advice at your own risk, and you'll see what I mean here in a moment. 1. Get low. I put this one first because if you only get to one tip in this video, I really want it to be this one. In my opinion, there's no better way to connect your viewer to the subject than getting down low. There's something absolutely magical that happens when you drop the camera to the subject's eye level, and this trick seems even better at the beach. I know that this may seem like an obvious tip, but honestly, the vast majority of shooters I see along the beach, even those with the uber expensive gear, can't be bothered to drop to a knee, much less even lower. Personally, I think that getting low is the easiest way in the world to skyrocket the quality of your photos. It's just too bad that so many people forgo this advice. Number 2, get wet. In addition to getting low, I also like to shoot right along the edge of the water or even get out a few feet into the ocean and shoot back towards shore. I think this gives the images a unique look versus the typical image shot from up on the beach down towards the waves. Obviously, this is something you want to do on a calm day or you're going to face having a wave consume your gear. But when the conditions permit, it can really look cool. As an added bonus, when you get out into the water a bit, it makes getting at eye level much easier. You don't have to drop the tripod as low since you're shooting from a lower elevation in the water than you were when you were up on the sand. Oh, a word of caution though, just be careful not to step on anything sharp or anything that likes to sting when your attention is directed at your photography. A stingray barb in the calf can really ruin your morning. In fact, I had one swim up to me when I was shooting and it buried itself in the sand about 6 inches from my foot, so be careful out there. As a side note for tripod users, when I'm out in the water, I tend to set my tripod up with one leg extended out, making it lower than the other two, so it makes that side a little bit shorter. That way, I can put the shorter side towards the beach, making things at least a little more level and stable. In addition, I find that giving the tripod a little push into the sand can help lock it in place and add some stability. Finally, if you're concerned about getting sand into the locking mechanism of your tripod legs, extend the lower section a bit to keep the locks out of the sand. And always remember to thoroughly wash your tripod when you're done shooting. 3. Keep your gear dry. Of course, with all this getting down low and getting out in the water stuff, you need to keep your gear dry. Salt water and camera gear don't mix very well and can often lead to unrepairable equipment. My first piece of advice is to be aware of the waves and keep in mind that larger sets like to roll through from time to time, as well as a possible larger wake from a boat. So never get too comfortable with wave size and always make sure they can't reach your gear. When I'm really close to the water, I frequently have to pull the camera out when a large wave comes too close. In addition to watching the waves, I sometimes like to take the extra precaution of putting a raincoat on my gear. I use the Lenscoat raincoat, and while this certainly doesn't make it waterproof or anything, it can help keep your gear a little drier when you're in the splash zone. One last piece of advice. If you use a tripod and gimbal head like I do, make 100% sure that you have it perfectly balanced before going into the water. Otherwise, if you're not paying attention and let go for a moment, you'll end up dunking your gear. 4. Shoot at the right time of day. The seashore can be tricky. The reflective sand and water help fill in shadows, so you often can shoot all day long without too much worry of truly blocked up shadow areas. However, don't let that be an excuse to sleep in. The best light is still at sunrise and sunset. Still, I often find that I can shoot a little longer at the ocean side than I can inland. The extra reflectiveness keeps the images looking good, sometimes for up to 2 hours past sunrise or before sunset. So, leverage the extra reflectiveness when you can, but still stick to sunrise and sunset for the absolute best results. By the way, I often find that when shooting in auto exposure mode, the the reflectiveness of the beach will sometimes cause an underexposure. Depending on the circumstance, I will often need to dial in anywhere between 1/3 of a stop all the way up to 1.7 stops. So always take a quick test shot or two and verify your exposure before really getting into it. Or if the light is steady, just dial in a proper exposure in manual mode. One last advantage to shooting in that early and late light, the lower intensity of the light makes it easier to pull off backlit and side-lit shots. In that first and last half hour of the day, I'm always looking for ways to have fun with something other than direct front light. 5. Use waves as compositional aids. One of the reasons I love getting low and in the water sometimes is because I like to use waves in my composition. There's nothing like using the edge of a wave as a leading line or showing drama and tension as the wave crashes into the shore and around your subject. Of course, catching the perfect look for the wave is the real trick here. So what I do is wait until I see a wave start at the edge of the frame in the viewfinder and then fire away a burst of shots as it comes in and around the bird, always keeping sharp focus on the bird's eye. I often don't know exactly what I've captured until I'm reviewing the images back on the computer, but I'm usually pleasantly surprised at the compositions Mother Nature has conjured up. This is another good reason to shoot early and late in the day. There's nothing like sunrise colors reflecting in the waves to really set off the composition. 6. Watch your backgrounds. Of course, you also need to keep an eye on your backgrounds, especially at the seashore. Frequently, the vegetation is low or non-existent, and you can end up with everything from people to buildings in your background. In addition, remember to watch your horizons. It's very easy, especially if you're at odd angles with a tripod, to end up with horizons that are anything but straight. Plus, if you can't see the horizon, it's even more difficult to know if you're level. For example, when I'm shooting in towards the beach at an angle, I know the ground should slope down towards the water, but by how much? Sure, I could use the water as a reference, but the waves and slope of the beach make it very difficult to tell if I'm really level or not. My solution? The viewfinder artificial horizon. On my Nikons, I have my joystick set so when I push it in, it activates the artificial horizon in the viewfinder. This will show me if I'm tilted one way or another and stays on until I press the joystick button again or the meter shuts off. This is a very handy, interactive way to quickly verify if you are actually straight as you shoot. Nikon users can set this feature up for their PV or FN button or for the joystick if your camera is equipped with one. As I was editing this video, I decided that I should add a short section to show you how to set up the viewfinder virtual horizon on your Nikon. Now, setup varies depending on the age of your camera. In this first section, we'll look at the older menu system in cameras introduced prior to 2016. In a moment, we'll look at setup for the newer menu system. So, for the prior to 2016 menu, we go down to our custom setting menu and hit Controls. And then we decide which button we want to assign. Both the preview button and the function button on this D750 I'm using for my example support viewfinder virtual horizon. You may have other buttons depending on how advanced your camera is that also support that feature. But for now, let's go ahead and assign it to the preview button. We click that. We want to take the press option from the next screen. Right now I have mine set for preview, but we want virtual horizon, so we're going to scroll all the way down to viewfinder virtual horizon. Hit OK, and we're all set. Now when we press our preview button as we're looking through the viewfinder, you'll see the level come on right at the bottom of the viewfinder for you there. Okay, if you happen to have one of the newer Nikons, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to Controls, and this time you're going to go to F1, Custom Control Assignment. You'll see the new menu here. You want to stick to the options on the left. Those are the ones that allow you to go ahead and push a button to have something happen. We don't need the push and turn options on the right. You can assign the viewfinder virtual horizon to the PV, FN1, or the sub-selector, the joystick, center push. I'm going to go ahead and put it on my center push. Again, feel free to use this on the PV or FN1 button. Setup is the same. Right now it's set to center my focus point, but that's not what I want. I'm going to go all the way down here to viewfinder virtual horizon. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm all set. Once set, just press the button and look along the bottom of your viewfinder. As you tip the camera left and right, you'll see the scale fluctuate as you do so. When it's centered up, you're level. 7. Always be ready for action. Another key is to always be prepared for action. Frequently, when shooting birds at the shoreline, I find that what started out as a portrait shoot soon becomes a sporting event. More than once, I've had my shutter speed set really low to keep my ISO down, but time and again, I would miss out when action struck. My solution is to use faster shutter speeds as sort of my default setting. Sure, I might briefly drop the shutter speed a bit for a lower ISO if I'm fairly confident that the bird is going to sit still for a moment, but once I have the shot, it's right back up to a higher speed in case action breaks out, even if there's no indication that action is about to erupt. In addition, as the day gets brighter, I tend to bump that shutter speed up more and more and seldom drop it, even for portraits. After all, I really don't care if I'm at ISO 100 or 400 for any given shot, but I do care if I'm at 1/1000th versus 1/4000th of a second if the action gets really intense. The other solution is to shoot in manual mode with auto ISO. This allows me to very quickly change the shutter speed and the camera will float the ISO to maintain the correct exposure. This technique is too involved for this video, but I did do a video about it a while back, and I'll put a link for that technique in the description area on YouTube and on the card above. Speaking of shutter speeds, I tend to favor 1/3200th and 1/4000th as my ideal action speeds, especially on a high pixel density body. However, if the light is low and you're dealing with slower birds, you can often use as little as 1/1000th with good results as long as your panning technique is solid. Just remember to bump up the speed as soon as you can for a higher keep rate. For portrait work from my tripod, I tend to favor 1/500th or so, although I will go lower in dim light. 8. Use the right AF mode. You'll also want to be ready with the right autofocus mode on tap. For stills and portraits, I prefer single point AF so I can focus precisely on the eye. Although, when the bird is constantly moving, even slowly, I have found myself switching to D9 on the D850. The smaller AF points on the D500, D5, and D850 are somewhat trickier to keep precisely where you want them on a moving or walking target, and D9 does make it a touch easier. When it comes to action, I prefer either Group AF or Dynamic 9 on my D850, depending on the circumstance. I find that Group AF tends to lock in a little faster in hectic situations, so I prefer to have that one on tap when I know getting or keeping an AF lock is going to be tricky. I also like Group AF when I need the camera to lock on instantly. For example, when a tern pops out of the water after a dive. I also find that the coverage of Group AF is just about right for most bird in flight and action shots. However, it's not 100% perfect. The dynamic modes tend to make it a bit easier to keep precise focus where you want it on the subject, so if I find Group AF is focusing on low foreground waves or going for wings instead of faces, I'll switch to something like D9. In general, for slower action, I tend to favor D9. For more hectic action, I like Group. That said, in 80% of the cases for bird action along the shore, either mode's going to snag the shot. 9. Watch the food. If you're photographing birds along the ocean, there's a heck of a good chance that they're looking for food. For shorebirds, this is often in the form of little crustaceans or mollusks, and when one is discovered, there's often a chance to capture squabble over ownership. If there's not a squabble, you can at least get them having some breakfast. For wading birds, it's all about the fish. When they catch a small fish, it'll usually go right down the hatch without much fanfare, but for medium-sized fish, you may get a little show. Often they will need to toss the fish into the air a little to reposition it for the big swallow, and you might be able to capture that moment as they do so. A good tip-off that an opportunity is about to happen is if the bird catches a fish and then runs back to shore. I think they do this in case the flip causes the fish to fall to the ground. It can't swim away that way. The problem is you never really know exactly when that fish flip is going to happen. Often it's as soon as the little fish calms down enough for the bird to feel comfortable flipping it, but that's tricky to predict as it tends to vary by individual bird. So if they are wrestling with the fish in the mouth, it's often a good idea to fire away until it's over, especially as the fish starts to calm down. You'll want to be in continuous high, have a very fast shutter speed, and have your AF mode set to AFC. Keep focusing on the eye, or as close as you can, as you fire away as the bird repositions the fish. The biggest worry here is running out of buffer, but it always seems like when I try to capture the fish flip using short bursts, I miss it. I tend to do way better if I just lay on the shutter release and hope the buffer doesn't run dry. After all, you can always delete the extra frames. 10. Be prepared. Finally, be prepared with non-photographic gear. I like to keep a little backpack with me when I'm out that has anything extra I might need. In addition to my 300pf and 1.4x teleconverter, I also like to keep a few other items handy. First is bug spray, because you just never know when you're going to need it. Some areas tend to be buggier than others, and there's nothing more annoying than something chewing on you as you're trying to shoot. Also, I recommend keeping a bottle of water and a small towel in the backpack. It will allow you to wipe away salt water and sticky sand from your hands and your gear. I also like to put my wallet and keys in my backpack, so if my pockets get down into the water while I shoot, at least my stuff won't get soaked. In addition, I also keep that lens raincoat I mentioned earlier in there, just in case the breaking waves make it a good idea to have it along. So that's about it. If you enjoyed these tips, you'll love my ebooks, Secrets to Stunning Wildlife Photography and Secrets to the Nikon AF System. Both are jam-packed with hundreds and hundreds of pages full of practical tips, tricks, and advice for getting the most from your camera and your photography. Plus, I've made them super affordable. Check them out at my site. I'll put a link in the description area on YouTube and on the card above. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it and tell your friends about it. And remember to subscribe, and you know what? Have a great day.